Hey there, folks. This is Kevin Madison from Project Dragonfly. I hope you enjoy this podcast about Dragonfly community members doing inspiring work. If you have ideas for a guest or want to be more involved in this podcast, please feel free to directly email me. Thanks again for listening and enjoy the episode. This week's guest is Tanoya Thompson. Born and raised in the Bahamas, Tanoya fell in love with the ocean at a very early age. She has been instrumental in helping us create Dragonfly's newest Earth Expeditions course in the Bahamas. Tanoya is a Dragonfly Global Field Program graduate. Now she's a Ph.D. candidate at Southeastern University. And Tanoya also is the first Wildlife Coexistence Fellow at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. She owns Wild Spark Consulting, which fosters leadership in conservation organizations. Tanoya is also a board member for the Vermilion Sea Institute in Baja, Mexico, and also Ecology Project International. Tanoya has many, many more impressive credentials. Suffice to say, she's an inspiring change maker. I know you will get a lot out of this episode. Enjoy. So Tanoya, welcome to the Dragonfly Conversations podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, here we are. So I thought we would just start off and hear a little bit about your Dragonfly journey. What drew you to the program and what kinds of field courses or projects were you involved in?
So I applied for the Dragonfly program in 2015, and I think I was just at a point in my life where I wanted to grow a little bit and learn a lot. I felt like I was growing in my career, but I am an avid learner, and I was just kind of feeling sort of this itch to explore and grow deeper in my skills and just, become more rounded, I guess you could say, within the field. And I was looking for graduate programs and happened to have a conversation with a colleague that had mentioned that they had just gotten into the GFP program with Project Dragonfly. So I looked it up and was like, this is perfect for me. So I decided to apply and thankfully got in and started in 2016. I think the thing that attracted me the most was obviously the study abroad opportunities. At that point, I had not traveled that much in my life just due to financial constraints and family constraints. And so it was a great opportunity to get outside of spaces and perspectives that I was comfortable with and move into exploring things outside. I've always had a very global approach to things as being an international student, being born and raised in the Bahamas and then moving to the States. But I just had never had the opportunity to get outside a little bit more. So that was a big draw to the program. And so once I got into the program, I didn't really know where things would lead, but I ended up traveling to Baja, Brazil, and Mongolia.
Nice. Excellent. Options for sure. Where were you working and in what field when you were looking into the program?
So I was working at Moody Gardens Aquarium and Rainforest in Galveston, Texas. At that point, I was there for a little over 10 years. I worked in animal husbandry, so I was a zookeeper. I started my career in the seal, sea lion, penguin department, and then I moved into the rainforest department where I got to work with a ton of amazing species, Komodo dragons and venomous reptiles and primates and lots of freshwater fish and parrots. And I loved working with animals. I loved interacting with people. But I also knew that I wanted to learn a little bit more in the conservation space. I just didn't even know what it was that I wanted to learn and grow into. So thankfully, I had the opportunity to move into a supervisory type of role as the assistant behavior management coordinator around that time. And that was a really great way for me to balance being a keeper and a mom, because it lended a little bit more flexibility in terms of work-life balance. But as I got into that role, I started to really gravitate towards thinking through how we could better our systems internally, how we could work to develop people in a way that helps them to move forward. And so it was a perfect time to join Dragonfly because through my coursework, I got the opportunity to really explore that in a way that I didn't even think I would, when I first joined the program.
Sure. And your daughter must have been pretty young at that point when you started the program and kind of grew up with you, with mom going on these trips and doing these things. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. She was 2 when I started the program. And looking back on it now, I didn't really have much of a hesitation. I thankfully have a super supportive and loving husband that was 100% behind me going back to school. Um, but I think I was not truly prepared for that first trip to Baja, but thankfully, I had some really amazing instructors and colleagues that were on that trip because it was my first time really away from her. And 10 days seems short, but it's definitely long when it's your first time away from your first child. So that was an amazing experience, but it was also a growing experience for my whole family in a unique way. So yeah, she grew up with mom being in school.
Yeah, that's interesting. My first Earth expeditions ever was I at that time my son was 5 years old and my daughter was 2 years old. And it was very difficult for me to leave and go to instruct this course. I went to Baja and Belize in that summer. And I remember in Baja, I was talking to Megan McDonald about it. I wonder if she told you the same, gave you the same advice, but I was talking about how hard it was and I was thinking about them. She said, Kevin, I think you should go journal on that. So, which was exactly what I needed. I didn't need someone else's advice, I needed to work it out myself, and write how I was feeling. And so I sat somewhere there at the ranch in the desert and wrote about it. And then I was able to sort of take a deep breath and be more fully present on the course.
Yes, I had a similar experience, but it was Leanna who she was my CLL at the time, um, and we just sat somewhere, and I didn't even realize that I was going to get emotional about it, but I did get emotional, and she was like, "Well, if you feel like you really need to, like, put it in your journal, talk about it with a friend. Like, it's okay to bring that part of you with you to Baja because it's a huge part of you." And I remember kind of doing the same thing, taking a deep breath and being like, okay, like there's no news from home, like everything's fine, like she's doing great, like my husband's doing great, like everybody's fine, and I'm in this space. I just need to trust and have faith that it's all okay, and I miss her, but I'm gonna be present in this experience because for me, I mean, there was a lot of firsts for me on that trip, and I wanted to really remember them. So I couldn't do that in the space that I was sort of going into. It's like that day 4 mark where you're like halfway in it and it's been a little bit longer than you've ever been away and there's no contact at all. You really start to feel it around then. So I was grateful for the support there.
Yeah, so I'll be curious to hear about some of the firsts that you had. And I agree, there is that day 4 mark that can be a struggle for people. You're leaving so much and you get so excited, and then you have that realization that you still have several days, and whatever you might be struggling with is going to maybe stay with you to some degree. So that is a pivotal time in each of our field courses, I think. But yeah, what were some of your firsts on that trip that you were so excited about?
Yeah, well, it was my first time to Mexico. My first time to another country other than the Bahamas and Canada and then the US.
Mm.
So that was a little bit different. I'd never driven across a border before either. Um, and so for me, those were like the first that I think I was anticipating, but the big first, I will say, was being in a space and place with a lot of people that I did not know. That was very different um, getting to be in a desert ecosystem I'd never experienced before. Um, I'd really only grown up in the Caribbean, which is not a bad place to grow up in terms of ocean space, but Baja has this other unique side of marine ecosystems that I'd never experienced. Um, and I was not prepared for sort of the instant connection that I would have with some of my classmates. Um, and that was a first for me because it at that point in time, it would take me kind of a little bit of time to connect with others in a way that felt authentic, just because there were a lot of differences moving back and forth from the Bahamas to the US. And I think I had sort of built this resilience and sort of settled in this guarded approach, like always, of course, being kind and loving to connect with people, but just feeling like I needed a little bit more time and space to do that. But that was a first for me in that setting. So that was really a fun surprise.
Yeah, that and it's funny, like now having been on so many Earth expeditions, both of us, right? It's sort of like without fail. It
Mhm.
really almost always it happens. It's like love at first sight of the group, or that there's maybe not love, it's sort of more just like a kinship feeling. And I think it is both shared love of nature, the
Yes.
idealism, the optimism. And some people are more introverted, some people are more extroverted. You have people of different ages, but everyone is unified based on that. So I have been surprised as well how quickly people start to connect and see that enthusiasm. That's so cool to hear.
For sure.
Um, so I want to hear more about the Bahamas, both, whatever you want to share, both your history with the Bahamas, and then obviously we now have this relatively new Earth Expeditions course in the Bahamas that you've been a huge part of. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit.
So I was born in New Providence, Nassau, Bahamas, and growing up, I think I always sort of innately understood how blessed I was to grow up in such a beautiful environment. Like I loved the beach. Like I remember being really tiny and barely knowing how to swim, and my grandmother kind of like holding onto my feet whilst I was in the water, trying to sort of pull me back because she was nervous and I was not. Um, and I just literally, from the time that I stuck my head under the water and saw like my first fish, I was just like, I want to work with fish when I grow up. And my mom was like, well, I think that's a marine biologist. And I literally went around saying like I wanted to be a marine biologist. Like I couldn't even say it. I was just like, I love fish. I love dolphins. I love this. I love that. And I just wanted to be underwater. And I, had the opportunity to volunteer at this very small aquarium at the time it was called Coral World, and then it shifted to being known as Crystal Key. But it was a small aquarium and they didn't even really have a volunteer program. And I remember being like 12 years old and calling them up and saying like, hey, can I like hang out?
Wow.
And
Wow.
they were like, yeah, like bring your mom, sign these. Like we signed something. I don't even, it was just a very just casual thing. And they let me follow them around. And then when they realized that I was like genuinely interested, I was like chopping fish and feeding animals and doing stingray talks. And that was a really formative time because at that point, I was just a kid that loved the ocean and ocean animals and, was this like, didn't have really anybody to model after or anyone that really connected with that in my
Mhm.
family or my friends. Like I was like, saw like one PBS special and I was like cutting like the Coke rings and like being like, well, how do we even recycle or how do we even do this? Like we didn't have those things, growing up. So I just remember my mom and my, family members like being like, oh, okay, this is neat, but like just not really knowing how to support it. My mom was probably the best in terms of like, well, you like dolphins, like here's all this these dolphin-esque things. Uh, and so I just really am so grateful for that opportunity and grateful to be, born and raised there because it gave me a unique perspective that even though it wasn't directly cultivated, it was indirectly cultivated within me. And so I knew as time went on and as I grew and moved through the field, I knew very early on that there had to be a way for me to get back to giving back to my country in a way that was authentic, but also in a way that was beneficial to the country in terms of everything that I had learned and bringing that back. And I didn't quite know, especially after I got married, I didn't quite know how that would happen because we're pretty much based in, Houston area because of, my husband's profession. And so, yeah, I remember having a very just kind of casual conversation at graduation where someone was like, you need to get to know Dr. soon to be Dr. Ancelino Davis. Like he's graduating and he's across the table over there with his family. And I was like, oh yeah. And they're like, he's from the Bahamas. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I just remember having like a very, I think there needs to be an Earth Expeditions course in the Bahamas. And, at the same time, just hearing like the history of some of Miami courses in the Bahamas and just kind of having this sort of back and forth with a few people at the table and then getting to meet Dr. Lino. So after I met him, we exchanged WhatsApp like contacts and just kind of kept in contact back and forth. Like, how are things going? How's the family? When's the next time you're in the Bahamas? Just casual or like, oh, look at this funding opportunity. You think we could do something with this? And then the right funding opportunity came around through Conservation Nation. We got a $10,000 grant to fund the start of Bahamians, Birds, and Botany, which is a citizen science and leadership program in the Bahamas for 11th and 12th graders. And so it's a way to bring opportunity, experience, and exposure to Bahamian teens in a way that helps them to be more aware of the environment around them, the beauty around them in a different way, and also a way that Dr. Lino and I could bring the things that we learned to the next generation and connect them to others. And so that very small conversation at graduation in 2018, 4 years later, spiraled into getting funding for this program. And through that funding, that brought me more opportunities to connect with other conservationists in the Bahamas and to be there a little bit more often. And just that, catalyst, those two catalysts of the conversations and that connection onto getting the funding to fund this dream of a program opened up this space to really start having a conversation about developing an Earth Expeditions course. So that's kind of the nuts and the bolts of that story. And I'm really grateful because it's just been an awesome experience to work with great people and, create a course that hopefully students can benefit from.
Oh, they definitely are. And so right now we're offering it every other year. So this winter it'll be running again. And so excited for that. And like you said, Lino Davis, so, instrumental in connecting people in general in the Bahamas. And then obviously when he was earning his PhD at Miami. So, and you two meeting, and then that story of you and your mother supporting you with the dolphins, even if she didn't know, right, like exactly how to support someone, but to show that she was giving you these gifts and these things, it's like supporting your idea and your inspiration to follow this path, and for you to just these conversations that build these programs, right? We have so many people that come to us wanting to start an Earth expedition somewhere, and a lot of them for various reasons just can't happen. It takes so much work. So it's so exciting that you've been able to do that, and also with the Bahamas, where you're from, and have this connection to and wanting to give back. I just love that entire story. So thank you for sharing it, because it's funny because I knew this general story, but hearing it from you is different. Like, so yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Well,
Cool.
and
I
I'm
want,
also
yeah,
grateful really quickly. I'm grateful for the opportunity to even start having the conversation about it. Because you're right. Like I know that it takes a lot. Like it's so
hmm
interesting by the end of, you know, by the end of the year, like I will have been a student in Dragonfly, a CLL, an in-country partner. Like it's just really, really amazing to see like that getting those perspectives and like putting that all
yeah,
together. But it takes a lot to put on an Earth expedition. From the instructional side all the way to the logistics.
right.
But it is something that works really well when you have the right team in place. And so I'm really grateful for that opportunity to work with Dr. Jill Korach and
Yes.
work with Courtney as the
Oh,
CLL,
yes.
and just all these great people that have great ideas that are interested in connecting and constantly working on making things better. I think that that's the key.
Yeah. It's a dream team for sure. We have a lot of dream teams out there, but this one's like really, really special for all the reasons you laid out. So I wanted to ask you about your PhD journey. And I know before we started recording, you said you're getting a survey out soon and trying to keep that moving. What are you working on?
Ooh, so kind of to take it back one step, I remember journaling in 2016 in Baja and having a conversation with Dr. Kathy and Khalil and saying that
Mhm.
at some point I thought I would want to get my PhD. But I think I said it very kind of tongue in cheek just because I couldn't envision like how that would happen, like thinking about traditional PhD paths. But after I went through Dragonfly and it was such a rich experience, I started like digging into what's a path if I really do want to pursue this. And I've always been really fascinated by leadership and understanding leadership. I found myself in my career uh, blessed to be in different leadership spaces and places. And I had so many mentors and colleagues, sort of telling me, I could see you at one point being an executive director somewhere. And I just remember thinking, like, if this is the path that I'm on, like, I want to do it well. And I don't think that you necessarily have to get a PhD in organizational leadership to be able to get on track to do that well. But I'm also a scientist. And I just felt like I wanted to understand the science, not just the art of leadership, but the science around leadership. So I found a program and have been knee deep in coursework around leadership theory, research and practices, approaches and concepts. And so now I'm at the point to where I'm a candidate and I am studying the relationship between perceived organizational culture and turnover intentions in conservation organizations. And the reason why there's a couple of reasons why I dug into this topic, but one of the main reasons is I see organizations as living systems, very similar to our ecosystems that we work so hard to protect and restore and insert all the things that we do in the conservation space. We're educating and working alongside communities to, build safer and healthier communities for people and wildlife and, the next generation and all of this investment. And internally, there's not a lot of research or in the organizational leadership space within conservation orgs. There's a bit of focus around like capacity building individual leaders and like programs to develop leaders in our space, which I think is really great. But as I was digging through the literature, there was not a lot that I could find looking at things like culture or teamwork dynamics. A lot of the studies that you see in the healthcare field or the K through 12 higher education space, people are looking internally at what's going on so that they can have, better leadership succession rates and, lower turnover and better organizational commitment and all of these things that, make up an organization. And so as someone who's been in the field, as a volunteer since I was 12 and then starting my professional career at 21, so over 20 years in the field, I've had a lot of friends and colleagues that have left the field and, moved into different spaces for different reasons. But I wanted to better understand why and understand how we could retain talented people. I mean, there's so many people that I've met in my career that are just amazing, that inspire me every day. And we need everyone to help with these huge biodiversity challenges. And we all know coming to this field, like we're not going to be millionaires. So it can't just be that. So what is it? So I had questions. And as I was kind of doing some preliminary market research, if you will, talking to colleagues and digging into the literature, two of the things that kept coming up was turnover being an issue, as well as culture, like just wanting to understand culture. And so as I was looking for gaps in the literature, I found a couple of future research opportunities through some of the literature that I found and decided to dig into it. So I'm trying to understand this relationship between organizational culture and turnover intentions. Organizational culture being that really deep layered thought of culture, not necessarily looking flatline, like, is it toxic? Is it positive? But looking at, those norms, those attitudes, those assumptions within an organization and the systems that are created based on those things, those values, as well as, understanding where people are in terms of the likelihood of them leaving their current organization and trying to see what the data will yield there. So I'm really excited about it. It's different. It's something that, like, I did not envision me even being like so excited about this sort of side of the field, but I am, because I think, it'll help us to develop healthier organizations to support people so that we can do the work and have the external impact even better, hopefully, in the future.
Right. That's fantastic. I think like you said, we look at the external ecosystem and habitats and the health of it all so much, and refocusing that on our work environments and the culture and the way we treat each other. We spend so much time at work, and the health, is it a healthy working environment for people? Because all of that will tie into creativity and how productive we can be, how effective we can be at conservation. I also, when you mentioned Kathy Yoon, I recently read her book on practical evaluation for conservation education, on assessment and impacts. And so that was super helpful to me. And just something perhaps you've already looked at. So that's all very exciting. And so many students do ask us, when is Dragonfly going to have a PhD program? But, there are these unique programs out there that can fit with people's lives. It sounds like the logistics of this one for you. Which university did you say again?
So I'm at Southeastern University, and most of it is online with 6 in-person residencies. So that made it, something that was accessible to me. And I really appreciated, like, the layout and the structure of how the courses were designed, as well as sort of that cohort model. So it felt like a longer, like, Earth expedition in a way with my cohort. We've connected and bonded and supported each other through it. So I really like that approach. And I've always been somewhat of an independent learner. So I think that's why, like, Dragonfly, like, yes, it was always great to be in person, but I also just gleaned so much from the coursework and the prompts and the assignments because I like working at that level. So it was a program that worked really well for me. And talking about Kathy Yoon's work with assessment, you know, within my capstone, that was one of the things that I sort of started like to tease out when I got to my capstone project was, this idea of like cultivating, this conservation awareness and thinking about how we do it individually, how our organizations do it, and how we connect with the community on it, and seeing this sort of like tiered approach. And then I realized, like, as I was like going back and reflecting on some of my work in Dragonfly, I was like, I kind of just, I don't know enough about the organizational, that middle component, which really bridges the gap between like the work that you're hoping to do and working alongside the community. Because you can have all of these ideas, but really like you got to go through that ecosystem of your organization. And so really like I was talking to Dr. Katie Filan about this as well. Like really like I'm still on my master plan, which is really cool. Looking back on that. So
Totally. It never ends. That's the thing. And I love that your approach, like the curiosity that you brought to the program, and that's going to keep serving you so well in your PhD and all these cool things you're doing with the Bahamas. You're also, I believe, are you still on the board with Vermilion Sea and Field Station in Baja? Yes. So I know you wear a lot of hats, and you're also working with Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. What is your title there, or
I'm
your role?
a coexistence fellow with Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. That has been another really just amazing opportunity. I've had the blessing to have in my life. I was able to not only get support as I was navigating the development of the Bahamians Birds and Botany program through the Cincinnati Zoo, but also just having yet another group of people to support as navigated challenges or people to celebrate like successes with. Because it's very different building a program that's not connected to an organization for students. That's a bit of a different approach. And so, getting the support and the feedback to really cultivate that program has been huge. And so, I was actually I was the first coexistent fellow. And then the program has developed from there. And so that was really awesome as well, like getting to work with Dr. Lily Maynard and dream big about how we can better support conservationists in unique ways. And I think that it's just brilliant in the way that that team is so passionate about supporting people. And I think that it aligned really well because as I've moved throughout my career, that's where my passion has sort of shifted. Like it's not, I still love the ocean, I still love wildlife so much, but I realize that we need everyone to be somewhat connected to this work. We also need brilliant minds to stay in the field as long as possible and to have the creative space to share their skills and their expertise and their experience. But people also need support along the way. And we need to create spaces where people feel supported as well as they're continuing to learn and grow along the way so that they can improve on how they connect with the community, on how they, launch that survey, on how they lead a team. I think all of these pieces are just as critical. And so that fellowship has really been such a supportive pillar to me over the last couple of years. And I'm just grateful for that opportunity with the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden.
Well, it's an amazing story and all these connections you've made. And from that very young age, I love that image of you swimming, trying to swim off into the sea. And it was your grandmother that was holding onto your legs.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're going to keep only having more and more opportunities, I think, coming to you, and you'll just have to figure out how to balance it all, but enjoy the journey and get other people involved. And for anyone that's listening to this, um, you know, I always think with Dragonfly, there's so many people that start this program and maybe they never thought they could become an executive leadership level person in an organization or get their PhD or help create a new program that's making a difference or become the first Coexistence Fellow at a place like the Cincinnati Zoo. So I think you're a great example for others that are earlier in their journey. And I'm just excited to see what you keep doing. So thank you so much, Sonoya, for sharing your background with us.
Well, thank you for your time. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to have this conversation, as well as thank you for all the work that you and the Dragonfly team do for so many students. It is very much appreciated, and it has changed the lives for so many people. So I appreciate all the work that you all are doing as well.
It's a pleasure. It's great work to be a part of, for sure. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Hi there, folks. Just one more thing before you head on out. If you have a moment, as I mentioned at the beginning, I would love to hear in what ways you are finding this podcast useful, how you listen, what you would like to hear more of, less of, etc. Please feel free to send me any and all feedback, any ideas for guests, etc. to Kevin Madison at my email, which is mattiskc@miamioh.edu. That's spelled MATTESKC@miamioh.edu. Thanks again for listening. Have a great day.